Okay, so this afternoon we are with author Ivan Maisel, and he is he is the author of the book I Keep Trying to Catch His Eye, a memoir of loss, grief, and love. Ivan, thanks for being with us this afternoon.
Well, thank you for having me.
So we're going to start off. I always like to ask this question, just to tell us your story. Tell us your journey.
The reason I'm here, I suppose, our only son, our middle child, Max, ended his life 7 years ago. He was a junior at RIT in Rochester, New York. We didn't know the degree to which he was struggling. We knew he was dealing with depression, but he was on medication and seeing a therapist, and all of a sudden, one night, get a phone call, Monroe County, New York Sheriff, saying they had found his car. And this is the dead of February, and what was a brutal winter in the Northeast. They had found his car at the shore of Lake Ontario. And there was really only one answer as to what the car was doing there. Somebody had seen him get out of the car and walk toward the pier that jutted out into the lake, and hadn't seen him come back. So they called law enforcement, and they looked for 3 weeks. They looked for his body for 3 weeks in 38-degree weather and just brutal conditions, and didn't find him. And once the water warmed up in mid-April, his body surfaced.
I'm so sorry. I know, having lost my husband to suicide, I know the pain of suicide and what that is like. And I have every ounce of compassion for you that I could possibly have. It's a very painful process to walk through.
Yes, it is. And really, that walking through that process was the impetus for writing the book. It wasn't just to tell people who Max was. I thought that was honestly a little self-indulgent.
Mm-hmm.
Loved him, great kid, but he was our son. And but what I kind of figured out was, once I was on this side of the fence, the side that you and I are on and that nobody else wants to be on,
right?
If I could explain what it felt like, and both in dealing with the grief and dealing with being someone who lost someone to suicide, to mental illness, and dealing with people who were so uncomfortable in dealing with us.
Right.
If I could explain all that, then maybe it would help people. And when they had to deal with grief, and when they had to deal with somebody they knew who had lost someone to suicide.
Well, I love the way that you talk about the grief journey in your book. I don't know if you want to speak to that a little bit. I love how you talk about love. Is that grief?
Thanks. That really helped. It helped me, and I thought maybe it'll help somebody else. And again, that's why I wrote it. I felt so awful, and I had so much pain, and I was just, I'm as a sports writer, I'm a sucker for metaphors and similes, and what is this? This is like this, and this is like this. And I just remember sitting there one day and thinking, well, I'm in this much pain because I loved him so much. And you boil that down, and it basically, the message that I began to say to myself was that grief is love. It's a painful form of love, but it's really what you're in that grief because you loved someone. And once I understood that and thought of it in those terms, the grief became much easier to carry. Grief does not have a time limit.
No, and it's different for every single person.
It's different for everybody, and you can't expect that it's ever going to go away. You just learn how to get used to carrying it with you. And thinking of it as love, just the form of love that love takes after you lose that person, really helped me adjust to the weight of it.
I would agree with that. Talk a little bit more about what you learned about the grief journey. You talked a little bit about, as a society, we don't like to talk about grief. We don't like to talk about loss. When you're in the midst of it, it is a journey. It's something you have to walk through. You can't, if you don't walk through it, it impacts the rest of your life, and you don't come out very healthy on the other side.
Yeah, I compared it to trying to hold a beach ball underwater. I mean, it's going to come up, and you have a choice to either bring it up on your own terms and control how it comes up, or it's just going to burst up in the middle of your life. It may be a not very convenient time. And as you said, everybody grieves differently. But what we said, we have Max was the middle child. We have 2 daughters. And what we said to our girls was, don't care what you do, don't care how you do it. We would suggest you find a grief therapist and do it that way. But whatever you do, deal with it. Because if you just, stiff arm it, try to hold your arm up against it, your arm's going to get tired after a while. And that's a short-term solution.
You also talk a little bit about how it was different in your family, that you grieved very differently from your wife, and recognizing what that looked like and how that was different. I thought that was really insightful.
Yes, and that we decided the first week that Max disappeared, when we didn't really know where he was, and we sort of instinctively decided we wouldn't judge each other. And part of that was the nature of our relationship. We come from different parts of the country. We have different religions. So we have been accommodating one another for a very long time. So we didn't you do what you need to do. And I didn't need to know all the answers. To me, it wasn't going to bring him back to try to do a investigation, for lack of a better word. My wife, Meg, needed every answer. She needed to turn over every rock. And and I think that might be a mom thing. I don't know. It may be personality, but we just decided we wouldn't judge one another. And as it turns out, David Kessler, who is probably the foremost American authority on grief, wrote, and we didn't find this, I didn't find it really till 4 or 5 years after Max died, that there is a statistic that half the couples who lose a child get divorced. And what Kessler said was, it's not the loss of the child that causes the split, it's judging one another's grief. And so we just didn't do that. We listened to one another and just did the best we could. One of us tried to have some level of balance. We didn't both go off the deep end at the same time in terms of emotions.
How did you do that? How did you control that, though? I mean, that's hard.
It's very hard, but there's kind of a rule, and this was not something we came up with. The writer Frank DeFord, the late Frank DeFord, who was a magnificent writer, lost a child with cystic fibrosis 40 years ago, and he wrote a memoir called Alex, The Life of a Child. That's just a terrific book. And he said in the book that he and his wife Carol made a deal that they wouldn't cry at the same time. And we had both read the book, and that first week, I said to her, we need to do the DeFord rule here. And so we just we had that in our head, and that was sort of a reminder.
Because you provided support for each other during the time when that person was most emotional, that you were the support. Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah, and Meg, and part of it is personality, part of it is male and female. Meg cried a lot more than I did. I certainly understood why she was sad, and so I wish I had been able to cry as easily as she did.
You don't really know. What I would always say to people is it comes in waves, and you have no idea when the big wave is going to come in, and you have no control over that emotion. It's just it just comes on you.
Well, that's a great point. We have a neighbor who had lost her husband suddenly to an illness. She said, grief is like standing at the shore.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes the wave washes over your ankles, and sometimes the wave washes over your head.
Mm-hmm.
But every wave recedes and goes back out.
Right.
And understanding,
Mm-hmm.
and it's really hard at first when you think you'll never feel good again.
Right.
But then you catch yourself having a good moment, and then you catch yourself having a good hour.
Mm-hmm.
And then you begin to understand that when you feel bad, it won't be forever.
Right.
That
Right.
it will go back out. And that really helped me withstand that pain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The other thing that you really talk about that is something that our family made the decision as well is that we were very open. You were very open about the story.
Yes.
And what people ask me all the time, why did I make that decision? And I'm like, I'm a very honest person. I had to tell it the way it was, but I'd like to hear from you.
There were a number of reasons. One is I'm a journalist, and I just couldn't imagine no commenting somebody.
Right.
And, when you work, as I did at the time for ESPN, and your son goes missing, that becomes clickbait. Son of ESPN writer goes missing. And we had to deal with that. Max, who was a very private kid, we used to kind of laugh those first couple of days, the idea that he was a story in People magazine and people.com, he would have been mortified. But he was, and so that was one reason, sort of professionally, I didn't want to do it, but also to me, it was going to be a lot of work.
Yeah,
okay,
exactly.
who was going to know what?
Yeah.
Where are we going to draw the line? Oh, okay, you're a second cousin, so I'm telling you this.
Right. Yeah.
And that it was all I could do to put a sentence together those first few days. And the last thing I wanted to do was have to worry about, we're not telling everybody everything, because really, and I felt this way, what difference did it make?
Yeah.
How he died. He was gone, and that was the overriding issue. It wasn't how he died.
Right.
It was that he died. And I, everything else to me before that paled.
Mm-hmm. Well, the thing that I really, for me, it was that we were opening that conversation with people. It made a lot of people really uncomfortable. A lot of people, I would say that I could be in the grocery store and I could see people run in the opposite direction, that they did not want to talk to me because they knew that I was going to be open about it, and they were scared to death to have the conversation. But now I can tell you, with a lot of time has passed, those same people come up to me and want to have the conversation with me now about a child that is struggling with the mental illness.
Well, yeah, and that happens to us as well. And I say this in the book, and I try to tell people all the time, if you come up and talk about Max, it keeps him present.
Right, exactly.
You can tell me a story about Max that I don't know. That's a gift, because I don't get to interact with him anymore. In my interactions with him, there's a finite amount. So if you can come tell me something, or just talk to me about him, then I'm grateful. Right.
It keeps that memory alive. It keeps that person, front and center, which I think is so important. You don't want people to be afraid to talk about it. So talk a little bit about the mental illness. What did you learn? What things would you want other people to know, other parents to know, that you learned during this process?
Oh gosh, a lot. First of all, I think as a society, we focus on the first word in mental illness and mental health, and it's really the second word that is the important part. And we're a lot better about it than we used to be, but the problems are a lot greater than they used to be. The issues, especially with young people. We used to think if we could just get him to college, he would find his own people. And I think the way that young brains develop, I think you got to get them to about 25 before they, or kind of got their feet under them. And I had a woman who is a psychologist at Duke University who I grew up with, called me the week Max disappeared and was so helpful in explaining the depth of mental illness and what that meant. And what she said to me was, you will never understand why he did this because you think rationally.
Right.
And that is clearly a decision that is not made rationally, and that is an action that is not taken rationally. So you'll never understand it. If you spend your energy on that's wasted energy. Mm-hmm. And I feel that, look, that might be a get out of jail free card, but it worked for me. I just felt like, okay, I accept that. And the other thing she said to me that really helped me was, unless someone who is going to end their life says to you, at this time, at this place, I am going to end my life, you cannot stop them.
Right. Yeah.
And that was very helpful. So, and a lot of that, I think, is dealing with the stigma of it, and having to deal with, are you going, as we were saying, going public with it. So much of the decision to go public is deciding whether you want to confront that stigma. Mm-hmm. And the fact is, I believe that mental illness needs sunlight. We need to talk about it more.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the more we talk about it, the better we'll be able to deal with it.
Mm-hmm. And we talk all the time, it's your brain. So why is it any different than your heart?
Exactly. And, you can't see your heart, but you can see the results of cardiac illness. Mm-hmm. People huff and puff, or they can't move very well, or you can see the effects of not getting oxygen. The effects of issues with your brain, we always interpret them as something that is belittling.
Right.
And that's, we're, as I said, I think we're a lot better at understanding as a society, but we're not there yet.
Right. I totally agree with you. I think the last 2 years that we've had a major understanding with a lot of people of what mental illness is. I think the pandemic has opened up a lot of people's eyes to that, but we still have a long way to go.
Yes. And more young, I think the kids we're raising are doing a great job of being open with their struggles, especially the public figures, the athletes and entertainers. Mm-hmm. And I think that's giving a lot of people permission to seek help, which is critical.
Right. I'm sure because I know you've been talking to Ryan Day, that he had his player this last week that came out and talked about his journey, and he credits Ryan with being very open and recognizing what was going on. And we need more people like that, having that conversation and being so aware that they know what's happening.
We really do, and we need them on campus, but especially with collegiate athletes who have such high expectations and high demands on them, both from themselves and from the public. And that's hard. They're kids. And,
exactly. We don't recognize that.
Yes.
We put so much pressure on them.
We do, and they put so much on themselves to meet that public demand. And look, I remember the struggles I had as a college kid, and I wasn't an athlete, I wasn't a public figure. So I multiply that, being under that microscope, it's hard.
Right. It's hard. Well, I don't want to take too much of your time. Is there anything else that you'd like to talk to people about that you learned in this journey?
I think we hit the most important points. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to, grieving is, it's just a question of learning how to deal with it. And I'm still learning, and I imagine I'll learn until I'm not living anymore. But
it's an ongoing battle every day. Yeah,
it is, and if you look at it as if it's love, then it doesn't feel like so much of a battle. It's just something you have to confront and understand, and keep putting one foot in front of the other.
Right. It is. Well, thank you for being with us today and for sharing your story so openly. You'll help many other people. I know we have lots of parents, especially that they want to hear how to help their kids, how to be open to these conversations. And so I think that'll be very helpful.